Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to Ohio State University's second annual Community Engagement Conference, Partnering for a Resilient and Sustainable Future. My name is Stephen Myers, and I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Outreach and Engagement. As we get started, I'd like to thank all of our conference sponsors. We could not have done this without them. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Roger Rennekamp, Director of OSU Extension, for his partnership in creating this conference. Thank you, Roger. I'd also like to thank our conference co-chairs, Alina Irwin and Linda Weavers, who along with Kate Barter and Roger made up our executive committee. But I'd also like to thank Jared Morrison and Ben Lewis, who are the project managers for the planning committee this year who organized the conference. Let's give them all a round of applause, please. We've got 2 great days ahead of us with over 120 presentations of faculty, staff, students, and their community partners around their work and engagement in the community. The meaningful partnerships represented by these collaborations are just excellent examples of mutually beneficial collaborations. As universities and communities work to solve complex societal problems, these meaningful partnerships are crucial because no one person, no one organization can really solve those problems alone. We benefit from partnering with others because they bring a diversity of ideas and talents. And that diversity and that talent diversity informs our work in ways which lead to greater relevance, innovation, and impact. Over the next 2 days, we hope you'll be able to interact with a lot of the different participants here and build new relationships as you begin to make progress through the work you're already doing. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ohio State University's president, Dr. Michael V. Drake, to officially kick off the conference. Thank you.
Well, welcome on this bright and sunny, wrong speech. Great to see everyone today, truly, kidding aside. This is our second annual Community Engagement Conference, and we're going to have several hundred people here during these 2 days to, Steve was saying 5, and that's great, but many people from across the community to really work and talk together about things that we can do to share the breadth of your experience and expertise on the things that we might be able to do together to be more sustainable and resilient. Community engagement is really a critical part of our land-grant mission. We're entering, very shortly we'll have our 150th anniversary, our sesquicentennial, and we were brought into being for the purpose of being engaged in our communities from the very, very beginning, that we are to develop knowledge and develop people who can do things that uplift the quality of life in our community. So we create and share knowledge for that purpose, and this is a great example of that. And meaningful partnerships are the way that works. We can do a lot ourselves, but what we can do is magnified really to have its effect by connecting with people. We can be, in many cases, the engine of change, but we need a transmission and wheels to kind of move the vehicle forward. And we're engaged with our partners from all aspects of the community on a daily basis. Collaboration is something that we're seeing more and more of lately in multiple areas of our lives. A couple that I'll mention that I see so profoundly over the last couple of decades. The last 20 years or so, the collaboration in medicine, in academic medicine, is something that was just not really thought of 30 years ago, and that is the data that we collect on patients and on best practices in taking care of patients and helping them to get better, faster. We share and compare those data with thousands of hospitals, several hundred basically, and then through extension, thousands of hospitals every month, and learn from each other about the best things that we can do to keep our patients safer. That's a great thing that we're doing. On the university side, we are members of several university coalitions that didn't exist even 5 years ago, where we share best practices and best ideas about how we can do a better job of admitting students from a wider variety of backgrounds, of helping those students to be successful, of achieving better graduation rates. And the diversity of universities involved in these efforts is something that's really quite stunning. I will share an example. I talked to someone yesterday, and I'm going to a meeting in a couple of weeks with a group called the American Talent Initiative. And the American Talent Initiative is really focused on helping to make sure that America's leading universities, most successful universities, train a larger fraction of the country's students from the lower half of the income distribution. We are all working together to increase the admission, success, and graduation of our Pell-eligible students. And what I noticed that was really great at the meeting last year, we meet in New York, there were about 110 partners in this, is the room something like this, a little smaller than this, not quite so many people, but the room had people from a variety of places like Allegheny College and Caltech and MIT and Ohio State and University of Texas. And so we went from small liberal arts colleges to large public research universities to Ivy League universities. Harvard and Yale were there. And I was thinking, gosh, these are people who have been in the same fields for many years, but haven't ever been in the same room together. And we would sit around at tables like you're sitting at, and there'd be 2 or 3 people who knew each other, but others from universities. Actually, there are people sitting at my table from universities that I didn't know existed before at that moment. And there was no one who didn't know Ohio State didn't exist, but there are people who I didn't know existed. And the real learning, the real opportunity was for us all to work together to collaborate to do a better job as a broader national community, in this case, to uplift the admission and graduation of Pell students. And I'll say we collectively got a notice in, this has been going on for a couple years, that by this fall, we had collectively enrolled 7,200 additional Pell students over the fall 2 years before, so it really was making a difference for those 7. Well, that I'll allow, yes, great. That was a great warming. I'll say 7,200 really is just the start. We're aiming to enroll by the year 2025 50,000 additional. So this was just the first 2 years that we're rolling into it. But already, 7,200 Pell students who weren't at our universities 2 years ago were now at our universities, and that's a great thing. And then we work on a thing, I'll say, called the University Innovation Alliance. This is now not as many universities, it's 11 universities. It's now in its 5th year, and I happened to get a summary note from them about a week and a half ago, and this group broadly has elevated the graduation of students from our colleges broadly. And Ohio State was, we did a terrific job. We, in numbers of graduates in our 2018 class compared to our 2013 class, the year before we started the initiative, we had a 20% increase in the number of undergraduate degrees we gave out last year compared to 5 years ago. And really importantly, within that, there was a 30% increase in the number of undergraduate degrees that we gave out to Pell-eligible students. So better overall graduation, better graduation of students from those backgrounds. And the key to these 2 initiatives, how they work, is that we get together like this in rooms. We share ideas and best practices. We don't compete with each other to do better. We support each other in helping to uplift the broader community. And it's been really nice to see these efforts bear fruit. And we are excited about the opportunity of partnering with everyone who's here today on doing what we can to improve sustainability in our own community. A nice thing about Ohio State, then, as well, is that we're large enough that when we do things on our own, we're able to exemplify practices that others can emulate and share. We can be supported in those efforts, but even our own efforts on campus are important to showing examples of how things can be done. There's some things that we're doing in sustainability broadly. One is that we've hired 60 new faculty in this area broadly since 2014. We're a lead research partner in Smart Columbus. We have a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks about that again. We're really excited about that. We've had our scientists have been leaders worldwide in techniques and procedures to be able to capture more carbon in our soil and help businesses be a better part of resilient supply chains. There are things that we're doing here that are making a real difference. In fact, just in our partnership with ENGIE and energy conservation, we revamped the area under the Oval. If anyone was by the Oval over the last 6 or 8 months, there were fences up and construction going on. Those are all coming down now because we now have a much more efficient way of moving energy and material around under the Oval, and we're continually trying to make ourselves a better example of sustainability. We also were pleased last year, I mentioned the coalitions that we had joined that are aimed at admitting and enrolling and making successful and graduating students from the lower half of the income distribution. We also are one of 13 founding universities in the University Climate Change Coalition, and this is a coalition of universities sharing information on how to do what we can to decrease our carbon footprint. We have a thing called the President's Prize that we give out every year. These are 2 awards that are given. How many? I'm just curious. How many people have heard of our President's Prize? Just hands up. It's a great. For those who haven't, I'll just say a word. We have a great number of undergraduates. We have over 11,000, 12,000 undergraduate graduates each year now, and we look at that group of young people who are going out into the world, and we give them a challenge, and we say, give us an idea that you can use to change the world. What's your best idea to use that you could use to change the world? We started this about 3 years ago. And we offer 2 of these prizes. The person has to write it up. They have to have a faculty sponsor. There's a committee that judges them, et cetera. We don't tell them what the project needs to be or what area it needs to be, and we look broadly at the best ideas that come from our graduating class. It's a big prize. They get a $50,000 of venture capital and then $50,000 of a living stipend. So it's a prize worth applying for. And I wanted you to chuckle after that, but they prize worth applying for. And we look at the best ideas that come from our graduating class. And it turns out, not just apropos of today, but it turned out that the 2 prize winners this year both were focusing on sustainability efforts, and that's really great. One, Zach Graber's, well, you can applaud that, that's a good thing. They've focused in the past on things like college attainment and food security. This year's 2 winners, Zach Graber is focusing on diverting landfill from central Ohio and really decreasing the amount of our waste that we put into landfill and increasing recycling, and he has a really ambitious goal of that. And Christian McGee has a wonderful project that's focusing on supporting homeless youth, and both of these will contribute to our sustainability efforts. And also today we're going to be announcing or launching our new Sustainability Institute. We've been planning this for many, many years in one way or another, and today this is going to be officially launched. It brings together more than 600 faculty and research staff across the university in broad sustainability efforts, so we're pleased about that. Another round, great. And with all of these efforts, I've mentioned several things that we're doing, these efforts. With all the efforts, what really works is taking a group of people who are dedicated to sharing their best ideas and best practices to do what we can to work together to elevate the quality of life in our community. It's central to our land-grant mission, as I mentioned, central to our founding, and it's something that's a part of our DNA on a daily basis. Today and tomorrow, I encourage you to share your ideas, to meet people, to make those connections, and then to challenge yourselves to see that you can take the connections you make and turn them into real definitive action over this next year and beyond. Welcome to The Ohio State University. Glad to have everybody here today. Take care.
Thank you, President Drake. President Drake mentioned the new Sustainability Institute that's being formed today, and that brings me to my next introduction. It's a pleasure to introduce Josh Knights, who is the Director of Partnerships for the Sustainability Institute at Ohio State, and he will introduce and moderate this morning's panel.
Well, good morning, everyone. That was the audience participation part of our program.
They failed that.
Yeah, I know, Dave. This is a tough crowd. I'm Josh Knights. As Stephen just said, I'm the new Director of Partnerships for the Sustainability Institute. Very excited to be moderating this panel this morning. And when you have an opportunity during a break or later on, we encourage you to check out the new Sustainability Institute website to learn more about it. It is si.osu.edu. For those of you that need memory tricks, think Sports Illustrated or Smithsonian Institute or Sustainability Institute. You'll get us. So I'm truly impressed by how many of you showed up this morning for a session that is simply called Opening Plenary Panel. You either have a lot of trust in Ohio State that we're going to give you a good show this morning, or someone told you that you needed to be here. But either way, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. So our job is to set the stage for all of the fantastic breakout sessions, panels, and discussions that are to come over the next day and a half. And we're going to step back and we're going to explore a few basic questions related to partnering with communities for a sustainable and resilient future. For instance, how do we make any progress these days with all of the gridlock, all of the polarization, and all of the other issues that seem to be gripping much of our political system? What's the best way to engage some of those communities in which we operate? And a really basic question, do these communities even want to be engaged around sustainability and resilience issues? So we've got a great group of speakers that have traveled here from coast to coast, that being the shores of Lake Erie to the banks of the Ohio River. Each of them have been on the front line of community engagement issues in their regions. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. Starting off to my right is Dave Abbott. Dave is Executive Director of the Gunn Foundation up in Cleveland. He oversees the foundation's work with regard to the arts, community and economic development, education, the environment, and human services. He also serves on several regional initiatives that seek to strengthen communities in Northeast Ohio. Prior to the foundation, Dave led several nonprofits and civic development groups, including the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You can ask him if he can still get passes for you. And he was a reporter for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Rebecca Karason, to his right, is Director for Energy and Sustainability at Huntington Bank. That's a very important affinity partner I think a lot of you know here at Ohio State. She's responsible for making sure that Huntington walks the sustainability talk with respect to its own operations and its support of the communities in which it operates. Rebecca's an energy efficiency expert and has a background in sales, account management, and program outreach. And prior to Huntington, she worked at American Electric Power. And then finally, PG Sittenfeld. PG is currently serving his third term as a member of Cincinnati City Council, where he chairs the Education, Innovation, and Growth Committee. He also sits on the committees on budget and finance, as well as equity, inclusion, youth, and the arts. PG had a fellowship at Google, but turned it down for a chance to come back to Cincinnati and found a nonprofit that took underused schools and rebuilt them into community hubs. So he's very civic-minded. He's been on the board of the Nature Conservancy in Ohio, the Free Store Food Bank, and several other nonprofits. I'd talk about their education, but none of them went to Ohio State, so why bother? So before we get into our panel, I do want to ask if, as much as we all enjoy Carmen, Ohio, if you have your cell phones on, can you put them on silence or vibrate during the course of the panel? So, panelists, let's kick things off by acknowledging that what's happening at the national level in terms of the political gridlock has significant implications for a lot of the work that we're trying to do at the community level. Just as one little example, we had a speaker for one of the other panels here today, and that individual who works for the U.S. Forest Service had to cancel his participation because of the partial government shutdown. So clearly, what's happening nationally affects everything from research funding to government permits to our ability to engage those communities in which we operate. So my first question to you is, given the current state of national politics, I'd like to ask you to share your thoughts in terms of where you see the best opportunity today to make any kind of progress on sustainability and resilience. And Dave, we're going to kick things off with you.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thanks for having me here, and good to see so many faces this morning. You know, the shutdown is an interesting phenomenon, and it's you would think that maybe the dysfunction could be shut down at the same time, but it's quite the opposite, actually, that it's just the worst example of our dysfunction at the federal level. But I do want to point out, first of all, that despite what we're seeing today, and especially over the last couple of years, the fact is that the importance of local and state level action has always been with us. I mean, we're in a country with a federal system where the localities and states have a huge role to play in policy making and in deciding the future of our country. And that too often we have sort of forgotten that and think that, well, the federal government's going to address every problem or needs to, and that's just not right. It's just not an accurate depiction of what happens in this country. So we always have had that responsibility at the local level to organize and take action around issues. It's just more important today because the federal government seems to be almost incapable of making a decision. But I think that there are opportunities at the local level and at the state levels. If you look at just the Paris Climate Accords, for instance, the goals that our country agreed to try to meet can be in large part achieved just by action by localities and states if we organize to do that. We can't do everything, and we absolutely do need national leadership and national attention to that issue, but there is a lot that can be done. And so thinking locally and acting locally are just as important as thinking globally and acting locally. And we need to always keep that in mind. So I think that, that there are lots of examples where you can organize your communities, your municipal governments, organizations, et cetera, to take action. That can be around climate change, certainly, needs to be around climate change, but it can also be around any number of other issues that relate to having a sustainable future. In Cleveland, a big one is water because of the issues that we have in Lake Erie. And this happens to be the 50th anniversary in July of the famous fire on the Cuyahoga River that helped launch the environmental movement as we know it. And we're trying to organize around that in Cleveland as a way to get more people committed to developing the kind of future that we need, and using that as an organizing tool, using it as a fundraising tool, as a public relations and awareness building tool, and ultimately a policy making tool in order to have higher levels of water quality in the river and in Lake Erie that contribute to a better future for all of us in Ohio. So there are lots of examples, I think, that we can pursue, but that's at least a big one in Cleveland that we're taking advantage of, but we're also always trying to connect that to our climate future. And as a foundation, we're always looking for opportunities to fund organizations that are doing that too, because we recognize, like us, we are a Cleveland-focused foundation, but we're always thinking about that focus and its connection to the decisions made in Columbus or in Washington. So you as citizens need to do the same thing. That's an obligation that we all have.
Dave, I like that a lot. I like your message in particular of being masters of our own fates and not waiting around for folks at the federal level to kind of rescue us,
Right.
Because that's not going to happen, at least not in the near term. Rebecca, would love to have some thoughts from you in terms of this question of where are the opportunities from your perspective?
Sure. From Huntington's perspective of being a regional, regional financial institution, we've been able to reinvest in the community. One thing that we've done in the past year is that we opened our operations facility off Cleveland Avenue. That was a former Meijer big box store, and we were able to renovate that space and reinvest into that community and made it into a $35 million facility. So that was one way that we were able to do it, through also private and public partnerships. I know that President Drake mentioned Smart Columbus. That's one thing that Huntington is very engaged in with EV charging stations, rideshare programs, the CPAS program. So there is still a lot of opportunities locally for sustainability, but it's very much people being able to pick up the torch and lead those efforts. But there are a lot of good things happening here in the Midwest, here in Columbus.
And Smart Columbus is a great example of that. It's a terrific private-public partnership, and obviously having folks in the business community makes a big difference in terms of getting results. So PG, PG I think is a good example of folks that are in politics for all the right reasons and trying to make a difference. Would love to hear from your perspective, especially coming on the front lines in Cincinnati where you see some of the opportunities.
First of all, good morning, and thank you, Josh, my old friend, for inviting me to be part of this panel, and to President Drake and the Ohio State University for having. Did I get that right for a Cincinnati boy? I've been practicing for the last 24 hours. Thank you. Easy applause line. Just two other logistical things. If anyone in the back ever can't hear us, feel free to flag, although my wife usually hushes me because I'm too loud. So if I'm being too loud, you can also give me one of these. And then since Josh gave us etiquette rules around our cell phone, I want you to know, if you see me looking at mine, I'm not being a rude millennial. I'm capable of being a rude millennial, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually looking at notes around this. So yeah, I have an enormous bias as an elected leader for the third biggest city in the state of Ohio. My message would be, don't wait on Washington. And I mean, just by show of hands, and I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot here, nor does raising your hand or not raising your hand ascribe blame in any partisan way, since we now have divided government. But raise your hand if you have a moderate or high level of confidence that Washington is going to help sort of solve, the problems around climate change and lead us where we need to go in terms of sustainability. If you have moderate to high confidence. A couple, pretty sparse. I'm not shocked by that. And I want to talk to the few of you that did. I sincerely would love to sort of, I want to share in your optimism. I think internalizing a sentiment of we're not going to wait on Washington is actually very empowering for cities and for states and for foundations and for the private sector. We had the federal government take the position relative to the Paris Climate Accord that they had. In the city of Cincinnati, we immediately said, they might be out, we are still in, and we're in even more than we were before. So just as one example, the city of I chair the committee at City Hall that oversees issues of sustainability and climate resilience for the city of Cincinnati. The most recent presentation from the city administration before my committee was about how this $2.5 million Bloomberg grant that the city of Cincinnati just won, I believe Columbus just won one as well, we are going to invest in one of the largest municipal solar projects in the entire country, which just as the starting point will make sure that we are powering all of our own energy supply for city purposes. And as you can imagine, we have tons and tons of buildings and our fleet and things like that.
It's not going to be another streetcar?
It's not going to be another streetcar,
Okay.
Although Josh likes taking these needling digs. Josh has Cincinnati cred as well, so he'll throw some inside jokes my way. So here you have a national foundation saying we're going to give money to a municipality so that they can become more sustainable. Yeah, look, do I wish that Washington said, hey, we're all in with you, but not waiting on them, I think, is the key thing. And if time allows, happy to get into a lot of other exciting examples about how Cincinnati is saying, we're going to run with this baton whether our national leaders are with us. And in case I don't plug this because I know a lot of practitioners are in the House today, I think just having a level of intentionality as your foundation, as your company, as your city leadership is really important. So the city of Cincinnati has what I think is a really beautiful blueprint. It's called our Green Cincinnati Plan. If you Google Green Cincinnati, it will be the first thing that pops up. So if you take nothing else away from my remarks today and you're interested in looking further, feel free to Google that and look at what I think is a really beautiful document for charting a good future.
So there's a lot of enthusiasm for kind of taking matters into our own hands, but what they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so I'm curious to know, what are some of the cautions that you might have for those who would take matters into their own hands? So we're all enthusiastic, let's go ahead and do something, but from your experience, what are some of the obstacles to kind of moving ahead? And anyone who'd like to respond to that, just as a follow-up question.
Well, gosh, the obstacles are as numerous as there are humans. The fact is that what you're engaging in when you try to organize around this or any other issue is human nature in all its complexity and challenges, and that means different points of view and biases and all of that. But that doesn't make it less important. It doesn't mean that you can walk away. You still have to do it. So you got to be a savvy politician in a lowercase p kind of way. You have to, it doesn't mean you have to run for office, but it means you have to engage with people who do, and you have to use your leverage as voters, as fundraisers, as funders, as people who can command the interests and participation of others. And all of the things that go with organizing in order to try to make a difference. It is really hard work. You have to manage your expectations. You can't assume that, oh gosh, if I go from here to there, I'm going to solve this problem. I mean, that just doesn't happen unless it's a really easy problem. And so you have to have a thick skin, you have to have some patience, and you have to stick with it for a long time and put up with all of the complexity of it. I mean, PG, thank God, engages in it in an electoral way, and not enough good people do that. And it's a brutal, demanding profession. But we can't just leave those elected office holders and office seekers out there on their own. They need us behind them, helping them, pushing them, prodding them, demanding they do the right thing, and having their backs when they do it, and take the heat for it.
Josh, I want to maybe use your question to pull back for just a quick second. This story has been emblazoned in my mind for the last couple of years. But I was in the city of Cincinnati, but driving south on I-71, a corridor many of you probably know well, and this is a couple years ago. Out of nowhere, it started raining so hard that it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to drive 10 miles an hour. All the cars just stopped where they were. And I looked to my right, and this hillside right next to the highway, after a minute, the earth from the hillside starts moving towards me. I mean, it wasn't like a full-blown avalanche, but nor was it normal. So very dramatic moment. Rains incredibly hard for like 10 minutes, goes back to normal. I was later told by people a lot smarter than I am, what actually just occurred was a 100-year storm, PG. Say, okay, a 100-year storm, that does sound dramatic. A couple months go by, and then there was a 50-year storm. And then a couple months go by after that, and there was another 100-year storm. So you start saying to yourself, either we need to change the nomenclature, or this is a crazy, urgent, all-hands-on-deck situation. And I just think big picture, and I realize we're probably mostly preaching to the choir inside this room. You know, the bad news right now at this moment in time is our planet is literally imperiled. And that is manifesting itself in some of the worst forest fires we've ever seen on the West Coast, hurricanes battering the Southeast, closer to home, algae blooms that threaten potable water right here on the shores of Ohio. That's the bad news. The good news is, I think we have people's attention probably more than we ever have before. So, I mean, my main response to Josh's question would be, to be kind of fearless and not to be timid about the things that could make us cautious as we plow forward. The one thing that I think that this movement, to the extent that it is coherent as a movement, needs is to just unfold more inclusively, right? Who's climate change and who does issues of sustainability impact? Every single person on Earth. The people that I think are often more engaged in that conversation tends to look and be much more homogenous. So I think we're probably going to get into some issues around messaging, but I just think building the Army and having the Army look like who is actually impacted by the threat, that's the thing that I would sort of offer most caution around.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Dave said, I think, from a corporation standpoint, behaviors, I mean, that's the biggest thing, behavioral change. One thing that we're doing at Huntington is we are going to be eliminating styrofoam and plastic straws. And yeah, too, I mean, that's a great thing. In 2019, and you would not believe how many people love plastic straws. I mean, they don't want to give up their straws. So it's a behavioral change. It's education. At the end of the day, it is about education. It's about educating people, and it's about communication. People won't do things if they don't understand it. So you have to drill home the education. But the biggest obstacle we see is that behavioral change, those people that don't want to let go of their straws, is a big thing. So, but one thing I didn't mention, and I'm sorry I didn't start off this way, but thank you all for having me, and thanks for being on this panel. I think this is a great discussion, great two-day, so really excited to see all of you here. But that's the biggest thing.
Everyone just put their straw back in their pocket.
I know, right? Right. No one has their straw out, right? I didn't. Okay.
Having worked, my previous employer was the Nature Conservancy, and it would be embarrassing if anybody ever did a waste or energy audit of our family in terms of some of our consumption. It's hard. It is hard to change behaviors. Well, that's a good segue into our next question. And that is that sometimes, and I think a lot of you in the room have experienced this, sometimes sustainability feels like number 11 on the top 10 list of things for a community to do. So I'd like to hear from the panelists, does it matter how you talk about partnerships around sustainability and resilience? And if so, what's the right language to use? And PG, you started to touch on this, so why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Sure. I would say to this room inherently, I think, sort of responds to language around sustainability and resilience. I agree with Josh that that's not true, I think, more broadly. So I think it's really important for people in this room to think about sustainability as the byproduct, right? If that's the result of what we're able to do, then we have achieved our mission. So the one thing I sort of preach in the city of Cincinnati is to integrate sustainability into everything we do. We build new municipal buildings. In the course of things, we need to build new police headquarters. Well, we happened to build a new police headquarters a couple years ago. There was the first in the nation net zero police headquarters. So actually, we are in certain seasons selling energy back to the grid. Most people thought, okay, we're looking out for our cops. We are building them a much needed new facility. But in the course of doing it, we happen to do things much more sustainably. So I would actually say that if it resonates with people, use the language that resonates. But I more think that if you are going into a community where there is really poor air quality, my frame would be talk about justice, issues of social justice. In Cincinnati, again, this is only from my own experience. I don't know how many millennials are actually in the room today. And I am an old millennial with gray hair. Not quite Josh gray hair, but I'm getting there. Millennials in my city really they are so jazzed and energized around conversations about public transportation. Talk about public transportation. If I'm talking to somebody that's on the more conservative end of the political spectrum, talk about how when we aggregated our energy supply and then happened to also say as a council requirement that we wanted that energy supply to be 100% renewable backed energy. I was proud of the clean part, but I could also go out there and say, you're actually now paying less in your energy bill because of energy aggregation. So talking about transit, talking about the fiscal argument, talking about issues of social justice, if the end result is greater sustainability, I say go with what resonates 100%.
Yeah, I think the language is really, really important. Dave, I'd like you to comment too here, and one of the things that I think about is the whole discussion over climate change and getting folks on the right who, not all of them, but tend to, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but tend to be skeptical about climate change. Is it more important to meet them on their own terms, or is it more important to get them converted to believing in climate change? What are your thoughts on that in terms of, especially in some of these rural communities where we're trying to operate?
Well, it became apparent to us in our work more than a decade ago that if there was going to be action around climate change at any level, you really needed to build a bipartisan coalition. It couldn't be done just by Democrats. And to do that, you had to find a way to build that coalition. And since that time, the issue has become even more partisan in its nature and harder to find that bridge to build. It reminds me that a number of years ago, as we started exploring this and trying to persuade other foundations to fund action toward climate change policy in a different way by not just putting it in Washington, but looking at local and state level action, especially in key states like Ohio. And to talk about the issue in a way that would be more persuasive, we started bringing in avowedly conservative interests in order to try to find out what they were persuaded by. And I at a conference a number of years ago, I moderated a panel, and the participants in the panel were the head of the Michigan Farm Bureau, a state legislator from North Carolina, and Lindsey Graham's political director. And these are all people who, as individuals, believed in clean energy and in the facts of climate change, but they all said, you can't talk about climate change. You can't even use the phrase climate change in their circles without shutting down the conversation. Now, that may seem irrational, but it's a reality that we have to deal with. And so
it's like the first rule of Fight Club. Don't talk about Fight Club, right?
Maybe that's what it is, but the
got a fan here.
Yeah,
so.
And so clean energy is the way to go for that group, and efficiency and job creation and messages that will have greater resonance with people who are conservative, and for a variety of reasons, many of which I find quite odd, can't hear the words climate change, but that's what we're dealing with. And so we, along with some others, helped launch the Ohio Conservative Energy Forum as a place where conservatives can coalesce and talk about this, and we're trying to use this as a way to make inroads in Ohio, and we're doing it with some success, not enough yet, in order to affect policy in Columbus. So the lesson of all that is that you do have to, as PG said, meet people where they are, find out what works for them and use the language that is going to be persuasive. It's essential, and it responds to this fundamental reality that we're a very divided country, and if we're going to make some policy advances, we have to build bipartisan coalitions to do it, and it's not easy, but we've got to find the language and the tools in order to get there.
Rebecca, you have a very interesting community that you have direct access to, and that's your customers for the bank. And Huntington has, I think, developed a reputation for being a green bank and devoting and investing a lot in sustainability issues. I'm curious, though, how much you see that as a way to connect with your customers. I'm thinking of an example where, again, with my previous employment at the Nature Conservancy, we worked with a home builder, and they were going to give $100 to the Nature Conservancy for every house they built. Mm-hmm. And what they found were a lot of the customers were like, well, we'd rather have the $100. So the kind of the middle ground was, we'll put together a $100 package of energy efficiency items, branded as part of this relationship with the Nature Conservancy, and give it to the customers. So I'm curious, from the standpoint of that relationship, how much are you able to reach them? How much, you talked about behavior, how much can you have an influence to that very large constituency that you've got at the bank?
Yeah, so, great question. So it starts with not only our colleagues, but also our customers. We have the fortunate, pleasure of having green as our color, so believe me, I market that. It's something where our customers do care about this, our shareholders do care about this. It starts at the top from Huntington. I'm very fortunate that our CEO, our leadership team, is on board with sustainability as a whole. It makes my job very easy to get certain initiatives across the finish line. But when it comes to our customers, they're very engaged. They'll ask about our recycling programs. They'll ask about what's Huntington doing around EV charging stations. We're putting EV charging stations out in our branches in Columbus for our customers, for our colleagues to take advantage of. We want to promote that, and that's a call from the community. That's people saying in their community, we would like you to consider putting these things in, and we're listening and we are delivering on that. So it's really kind of what PG said. It's kind of this movement. It's coming from not only millennials, but it's coming from kind of all different generations that have different needs, and we're listening and doing the best that we can to implement those type of initiatives that they're calling for. And really, it's the partnerships with Ohio State, other Smart Columbus, other organizations. That's how you make things happen, is through collaboration. Is coming together, offering different solutions. Within Huntington, we have a renewable financing program that offers, for businesses, that offers, energy efficiency financing if you're doing improvements, as well as on the renewable side. And one thing I'm working with internally is to kind of roll that out for residential as well. So we're doing a lot of great things, but it really comes from, our customers, the need, the feedback, and then also our colleagues, and we value that.
Josh, can I just add one thing?
Please,
that
PG.
I think in terms of building a bridge in what Dave accurately said is an unfortunately kind of staggeringly divided country at the moment we find ourselves, is what an incredible role the business community can play. So when I'm in council chambers in Cincinnati and I want to advance what I think most people would think of as a sort of progressive or liberal policy, so greater protections for LGBT employees, or more progressive sort of family leave policies, it would be easy for someone to say, oh, God, this is more like liberal big government telling us what to do. My favorite thing to do is say, well, actually, Procter & Gamble, one of the most successful companies in the history of the world, they do this in their family leave policies, or this is what they do to support their LGBT employees. So I actually think having the business community step up, as Huntington and many others are around sustainability, it lets people who, maybe you're in government, maybe you are left of center, say, well, actually, the most successful entities in the private sector think this is a good thing. And obviously, there are issues around talent attraction, too. I'm sure Huntington wants to do it because it's the right thing. But also that 23-year-old Ohio State graduate who they need to be their future employee, it responds to them well. So I just think the business community can create a bridge that is too often missing and left-right and make it seem like, okay, the private sector is behind this, so maybe it just makes sense across the board.
I think that's a great point, PG. I mean, the business sector often leads the way on a lot of these issues, and sometimes we find the policymakers are just playing catch-up to where the business community is, and it's all sorts of issues, not just sustainability, but it could be technology use, a variety of things where business is leading. So no pressure, Rebecca, but we're expecting big things.
Well, one thing I want to mention is that a lot of people don't realize that my position exists at every financial institution. This is not a new thing. There is a sustainability person on staff in financial institutions. So we're all trying to lead the way in what we can do for not only our organizations, but our customers as well. I sit on a monthly phone call with my peers from other banks, whether it be Wells Fargo, Chase, KeyBank, all of them, and we share best practices because we want to see not only our organization succeed, but we want to see theirs as well and work towards that common goal of, reducing our carbon footprint and doing what's best for the environment.
And just a question for Rebecca that I kind of know the answer to, but if you are...
Hopefully I know the answer to.
If you're... Well, no, I mean, you are the sustainability director for a massive and powerful institution that has a huge number of employees in 8 states. If, Joe Citizen wants to engage your role at one of those, I mean, how doable is that and how should one go about that?
I do a lot of speaking events. Like I said, Ohio State's been a great partner where I've done some speaking events in front of some undergrad classes in sustainability. And I like to think I'm pretty approachable. So anyone that would like to engage me on, what it's like to get in this position or just pick my brain, I'm very open to that. I've had conversations with our customers who are just in the community and they want to chat about sustainability and they want to know more about what Huntington's doing. So I've had great conversations with people. It doesn't matter if they're a student, if they're a colleague, or if they're a customer. So it's been great. So I think I would like to think everyone's approachable and everyone can reach out and ask those questions. And I would encourage, the students in the room to do that, or other people that are in this industry to reach out and have a better understanding of what these positions encompass. I wear both hats of energy and sustainability, and that's kind of uncommon, at least in my segment, in my, in the financial institution world, where mostly my peers have just the sustainability hat on and not energy. And I really believe that you have to understand both worlds. They both have a direct impact on the environment. So that's one thing I'm fortunate to kind of have that as a background and that as a job duty.
So I want to sneak one more question under this topic before we move to the next one. So the message here is meet your audience where they are, whether it's conservative or rural or your customer base or millennials. That's hard advice for people to follow because they're going to need to spend a lot of time figuring that out, but it's probably good for the long term. But I'm curious, we all like shortcuts. Are there any buzzwords or any issues that you think cut across all of these different communities in which we're operating, especially on the topic of sustainability, that if you brought up the issue would get their attention, would speak their language, so to speak?
Well, clean energy may be the best. It's not comprehensive. It doesn't cover everything, but it does touch on a big chunk of it, and because of the role that dirty energy plays in contributing to climate change, and it may be why you have both in your title and your responsibilities. Maybe you're setting a trend.
Rebecca, do you have any?
I think a lot of it, especially in the corporate environment, a lot of it comes down to financial impact. A lot of the initiatives I've been able to get across the finish line was putting together business cases that showed not only the importance in speaking that language and knowing your audience and kind of putting in kind of that, political flavor in there, but, it's just one of those things that you just have to show the numbers. A lot of this does make financial sense. Solar does make financial sense today because of the tax credit that's out there, and the way that you do it. So there are things that maybe didn't make sense 5-10 years ago because it was new technology, it was higher priced, but LED lighting, that's come down a lot. So it's also the financial impact and being able to show that this will reduce your operating costs.
Okay, so finance, PG, a thought?
Sort of in general, I hope this doesn't sound overly sneaky. Politically, I'm a fan of usurping the language that your opposition might try and use against you. So, if I think there's probably consensus that there's more energy around sustainability and resilience on the left than on the right. That's, again, not to paint with too broad a brush, but I don't think I'm going way out on a limb there. So think about a frame of like freedom. Some people might talk about, freedom from onerous regulation. What about freedom to breathe clean air? So using that language. You think about a frame of being pro-family. What about if you're a senior, what about having your grandchild make sure they have access to clean, potable drinking water? So I'm actually also a fan of use the language that people might want to use against you to, reposition why what you're doing actually makes sense in those frames.
Well, thanks. I appreciate those answers. Unfortunately, the response I was looking for was public health. Just kidding.
I was about to say
all
that.
very good. Oh, yeah, you were just about to say that. Yeah.
Josh,
No,
what do you think? Yeah.
These are all very good. All right. Next topic, and our final topic for our panel. So we've got a lot of community engagement practitioners in this audience, and what advice do you have for all of them in terms of how you motivate people to take action on issues related to sustainability and resilience? Gets to some of those behavioral issues that Rebecca raised. So Rebecca, why don't we go ahead and start with you first on this one?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it starts with behaviors. And again, it helps when you have the support from senior leadership. One thing that we were able to create within Huntington was a green team. I'm sure Ohio State probably has something similar, but this is a group that comes together from colleagues. It's made up of colleagues across all different job functions and departments within Huntington that share a passion for sustainability. So something that they don't do every day, that's not a part of their job, but they share a passion for it. We come together and we have a space to collectively share ideas on how to make Huntington more green, how to improve the initiatives, how to improve the different things that we're trying to do within Huntington. So that's been very effective. We have over 100 members right now, and that doesn't make up only Columbus, but that's other people from different parts of the regions. So that's one thing, if kind of collectively coming up. That was one thing that came out of that green team was the elimination of styrofoam. That was a colleague-driven initiative. I'd like to take part in that, but that was a colleague-driven initiative that came up. That was something that was a need that they saw, that they wanted. We're talking about composting. We're talking about also doing pollinator gardens. So there are a lot of things that we're discussing within this green team, and it's great because I get to hear what colleagues want. I don't stay in my bubble of just energy and sustainability and just focus on kind of the financial impacts. I get to hear what people want and what's important to them and see if we can't make it happen. So it's very much a team effort. Another thing that we did was for Earth Day last year, we did electronic device recycling events, where we engaged the colleagues to bring in things from home that they wanted to recycle and be able to just kind of have a group effort with it. It was really successful, and we're looking forward to that again this year. But really, it is that behavior change, but it's understanding what people want. Going back to kind of, that language, a lot of people may not like the buzzword climate change or clean water or any of those things, but they understand everyone wants to reduce energy. Everyone wants to reduce consumption because it equates to a dollar amount. So people are doing these things without really using those buzzwords. They don't want to use the buzzwords, but they are doing things to help reduce our carbon footprint as a society, as a country. So But again, it comes down to that behavior change, and those are the things that we're doing within Huntington that I'm really excited about and very passionate about, and I hope it grows and continues.
Thanks, Rebecca. So, PG, you are the top vote getter on Cincinnati City Council.
Go on.
So you obviously know how to get people to do something you would like them to do. I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of motivating people to take action.
Well, one, if there's any other elected official in the audience today, leave your hometown and you will get like a much bigger ego boost than you get when people are just like kicking you in the shins on a daily basis. So I need to come to Columbus more often from the remote island of Cincinnati. Couple things. One, I would just reemphasize, because I think it's so important. Here's an analogy. If I put a piece of delicious beef in front of my adorable rescue puppy, she's gonna gobble it up. If I put a carrot in there, and I've tried this, she puts it in her mouth and then spits it out. Like, talk to people about the thing they care about. Because really building these coalitions is, to me, how can you get people to care and talk about the thing that they actually care about? So we already talked about that. The new point I would make, and I realize I'm like sort of giving a glimpse inside my political brain here, because I think these things cut across more than just issues of sustainability. A really good friend of mine in Cincinnati is Michael Fisher. He is the president and CEO of our Children's Hospital, which is the second most highly ranked children's hospital in the entire country. Michael is brilliant, and Michael is effective, and he leads an awesome institution. I always tell him, Michael, when you want us to deliver a message about Children's Hospital, who's better to do it? You, with all of your brilliance and your fancy title and your authority over this 14,000 employee institution, or the parent of a child whose life was saved by your institution? The latter, right? So I think really thinking about building coalitions, are you deploying the right messenger? If you want to galvanize Ohio State students around something, Josh, as hip and cool as he is he a better messenger, or is he better to empower a 20-year-old who already has that network of relationships? We've been dealing with this situation around the expansion of a natural gas pipeline, which I would argue is happening a little bit too close to some of our residential neighborhoods, churches, synagogues, hospitals. Am I a better person to go into certain neighborhoods and explain why this is really important and why we need to organize around this? Or am I a better person to talk to a respected pastor at a church who's along that natural gas pipeline, and then they're the one talking to it? So I think that the really key piece of building these coalitions, talk to people about the thing they care about, and make sure the right messenger, and this takes sort of like stepping out of your own ego, that you might not be the best messenger to deliver the message.
Well, let me say a word about public health. No, in fact, to both of PG's points, we commissioned a lot of research as part of this effort to figure out what would work to help build a coalition to advance policy on climate change in Ohio and beyond. And health issues are a huge concern of people, obviously, and they are related to climate. And finding the right message around those issues, tying clean water, clean air to the health of people, whether it's asthma or some other kind of malady, and then finding the right messenger, as PG said, is also very important. And one of the things of the research that we commissioned showed was that health professionals are among the most trusted messengers that all of us listen to. And so we've been trying to help organize doctors to talk to each other and then to patients and other forums about the importance of climate change and its relationship to public health and to individual health. So we have a long way to go on that, but that is an important thing that we all can think about, and we could be talking to our medical care providers about it and asking them to think about it and to be involved in it.
One of the things that does motivate folks, obviously, is also green. It's money. And I'm curious, Dave, just as a follow-up question to you, because we're talking about motivating behavior, and a lot of our folks working in the community, sometimes Ohio State has the resources to apply, but sometimes they have to find additional resources to make whatever project or outreach or initiative happen. Any advice to them as a funder who's been in this business for a while in terms of funding opportunities for community engagement from your perspective?
Well, it's like the process of building any coalition. You have to find people who can contribute something, even in small amounts, in order to pool resources to make a difference. It's like pooling votes, it's like pooling influence, activity, et cetera, in order to build a coalition to get you where you need to go. There is no single source of money that's going to be big enough or powerful enough to really do everything that needs to be done, even though Tom Steyer may think that he is. But the fact is you need to find a variety of people who contribute, who put skin in the game in order to build the resources that you need, and it's a never-ending process.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Funding? Rebecca, do you want to touch that one?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we have projects that we budget, that we have budgeted that we do, and then we have projects that we have to make a business case for. One that we just did was for our Easton location, if you're familiar with, it's about a 500,000 square foot facility, and we are putting a white roof and bifacial solar panels all across the flat roof area. So it's a huge project that's going to be done at the end of Q1 in March, and so that's something that actually was not budgeted, and we made a business case for because it made financial sense. We are going to be replacing the roof with the tax credit. So I think it is a hard road to try to get initiatives across the finish line, but I think if you position them out well and they make financial sense, and if you're just in kind of the right, when people are in the right mood for it because they're seeing maybe that other banks are doing it, it's kind of follow the leader in a lot of ways. So when we share those best practices, it really does help spur one another to get their leadership on board to push forward initiatives.
Great. Well, look, this has been a very good conversation. I hope it's set some expectations for you for the next day and a half. There's a lot more to follow here, but to wrap up, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share one significant takeaway from the discussion. And depending on their level of modesty, it could be something they said, or they could bring something up that another panelist brought up, or just something that's occurred to them since the conversation started. Dave, we have to let PG have the last word, so we're going to start with you.
Okay, well then I'll give him the first word too, because being reminded about the importance of the messenger as well as the message is something that I appreciated, and I think we all need to keep in mind.
Excellent. Rebecca?
I think the number one thing that gets people to listen about this issue is people having passion around it. When you see a lot of people come together that have a passion for it, that's what I think really resonates with other people when they listen to the issue. That's what sparks behavior change, and that's really, it's coming from the education standpoint. So I encourage you to not only have the passion, because all of you have a passion for coming here and listening about this, but really get that education and be patient with people. People will come around. They will come around to this issue. You just have to be patient, and you just have to keep educating them with facts.
Well, and I'll add, Rebecca, to what you said, that sometimes when you are the agent of change, it helps to have other folks out there that share your passion.
Exactly.
It helps you going. PG.
Yeah, I would just end by saying thank you again to everyone who participated in this, and Josh and Kate for putting this together. Not to end on a totally sappy, cheesy note, but I do think what this conversation has me feeling is really everyone asking themselves what they can do, and more specifically than what they can do, who they can engage. I'm in this every day, so I think I sometimes forget, for people who aren't, how's this look? It's not very difficult at all to engage your local elected officials. Maybe you're a member of Congress, they tend to go into hiding a little bit more, but it's not that hard to engage your councilman, the head of energy and sustainability for a massive corporation, to engage the head of a really prominent foundation. So I just think asking yourself, either in your existing networks, who can you call? What ideas can you float? How can you push people to push the conversation forward? This has me sort of almost eye-opening about that. I'm going to start going down a list and calling all of the Rebeccas at every financial institution in the phone book.
I can give you that contact.
And see what we can get done. So
Excellent. Good job. So unfortunately, we gave our question and answer time to President Drake this morning. Hopefully that was a good trade-off for all of you, but I think our panelists will be sticking around for at least a few minutes before they have to head off to their next appointments. In case you have some questions, come on up. Feel free to ask them that. But we're going to have to leave it there in the interest of time. On behalf of Ohio State, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. Please join me in a warm round of applause for our panelists. So we're going to invite all of you to head to your first breakout sessions. Those breakout sessions start at 9:45. They're scattered throughout the Ohio Union here. So have a great day. Thank you for coming this morning.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. You'll probably be hearing from me. Yeah. Josh, you are moderator extraordinaire. Yeah, that'd be great.